How are you doing? And I'm Jeannie, and I'm the host of So You Think You Can Write. It's a podcast, and I'm also an independent writer. And can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Ceri Savage. I'm also a writer. I like to do creative writing projects, but my main job and my biggest project at the moment is being the founder of Savage Edits, which is an editing company that works with indie authors, providing editing services.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you're based in which country are you based in? Because right now I'm in the U.S.
Where in the US are you?
I'm in Texas.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm based in Berlin, in Germany. I've lived here for almost 2 years, about a year and a half. But I'm originally from a town called Kidderminster in England.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go to England. So
Yeah. Maybe you can skip my town, but I can recommend some nicer places to go. Yeah.
yeah. So I just arrived in Houston myself. So I've been here like less than 3 months. So yeah, it's been a ride. Yeah.
Oh, do you like it?
So far the weather is better than other, but we don't know yet. I don't know. It's America's crazy weather.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like different each state, and yeah, it's crazy, and everybody's different in each state as well, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Big case.
Yeah. So yeah, because I'm a indie author, and I've often hear people, especially I'm a indie author, and I just started out. I want to learn more about editing and why is it important for indie authors, and is there really a difference as compared to if the indie authors themselves just proofread it and just edit it themselves? Like, I mean, why should we hire editors if we can just do it ourselves? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I mean, I'm biased, of course, but I honestly, truly believe that you cannot edit your own writing. You can reread your own writing hundreds of times and there will always be things that you miss. You're just too close to it. It's too personal to you. You're going to be thinking about the phrasing that you used or what the sentence reminds you of or where you were when you were writing it. And the editor's just going to not see it that way. They're going to see it from a reader's perspective, not a writer's perspective. So the value of an editor is really, it's a person that looks out for the reader and makes sure that what you're saying as a writer is coming across to your audience. There are many things that an editor does that a writer just can't do for their own writing. You know, proofreading and checking the practical grammar, spelling, punctuation, all that side. You know, that's also a huge part of it. But then there's also this other part of it of picking up on the content and how to develop the story in a way that's best for the reader that the writer just can't do themselves. And a second pair of eyes on your writing is always going to be invaluable.
Mm-hmm. So I have often heard, and I have hired editors myself, but what is the difference between the other types of editing? Of course, you mentioned proofreading. There's also line editing, and there's developmental editing, and there's copy editing, and there's different types of editing. And can you explain them? Because sometimes it's like for writers, it's just editing, you know. But why should we hire a line editor? Why should we hire a developmental editor and stuff like that?
Yeah, so just to go through it really simply, proofreading is one type of editing. And that's the kind of final check of your work that you should be doing. So that's just to read through and make sure there's no mistakes, there's no typos, there's no spelling or grammatical errors, and just kind of make sure that nothing's fallen through the cracks before you self-publish your book. Then there's also developmental editing, like you say. That's also sometimes called content editing. And that's looking at the actual story itself. So it's looking at like the creative aspects of the story, the language techniques, the plot points, the character development, the use of dialogue, any inconsistencies in the story, and just making sure that the story and the story arc is as good as it possibly can be, especially for the reader, and making sure that that story really comes through to the reader.
Mm-hmm.
Then you also have copy editing, which is also called line editing. And they're both an in-depth scrutinization of the language where you look line by line at the wording and the phrasing, the word choice, the flow, the style, and just make sure that the communication itself in the words is as perfect as possible. And that's really very in depth because the editor will look at each sentence, 2 or 3 times and make sure that it's phrased in the most powerful way possible. And then at Savage Edits, we also offer like a bundle package of all 3 of those editing in one, just to make sure that it's gone through every type of editing before it's published. But for example, some people might not need developmental editing if they go to something like a regular writing group where they get a lot of feedback on their story anyway. And in that case, you might choose to only have line editing and proofreading. But in some shape or form, you want to have all 3 of those edits before you publish. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, what if a writer is just starting out and really is on like a really tight budget? What is the editing that you guys really recommend that they don't skip out on? Like, it's like, don't skip out on this one. You really need this as a writer, even if you're a budget author or you're just budgeting and you have you're starting out. So what is the most important one if they were to choose?
Yeah, I would say that you can self-edit as much as possible, and then the most important one would be proofreading, because that will check for anything that falls through the gaps, and that's the cheapest option as well. Yeah, but you need to have proofreading at least. Yeah.
Yeah, and after that, let's say they have like a middle budget, like so proofreading, and then what is next? Like if they are like, oh, okay, I think I can spend more on my book,
I think that really, I know it's not a very clear answer, but I think that really depends on the author. Because if it's an author that's very, very happy with their storyline and their characters and their plot points, then maybe they would prefer some work on their language, which would be, copy editing. But if someone has very strong language, they're very happy with how they phrased everything, but they're not quite sure that their story is exactly how they want it to be, then they would want to have developmental editing. So it does depend.
Yeah, so you did mention the language. So you're from the UK and you're based in Berlin. So, and I'm in America, and like I'm sure you guys cater to American authors as well. But how can you convince like an American writer that's catering to America to like, hey, go with us? Like I'm from the UK, but is there like a difference? Of course, there's nuances. I think you guys. You have different terms and like, yeah, right, words that you use, like especially the Australians as well, they have their different language and terms. But how can you like capture the American colloquialism and the the verbs and the words that fits the American market? Yeah, so we're gonna go back to our line of thought. I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm going back again. I'm sorry because Baker has interrupted again. So going back to the language and the difference between like the American audience and the UK audience. I mean, I love British literature. Actually, that's my favorite. Contemporary British literature. But yeah, there's a difference though, because when I read the British writers' books, there's like their words and their phrasing, it's so different from the American like novels and stories.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've worked a lot with American writers, so I have got very used to American colloquialisms and phrasings. But yeah, I think the most important thing is that an editor should never change the voice of the writer. So it's not my job to change Americanisms. It's my job to look up those phrases and make sure that I understand them as a British reader, in the context of the writing. But yeah, it's the writer's words, the writer's phrasings. That's not something that I would change. I think as long as it makes sense in context, so that it would be available like to a British audience. But that's also something very endearing about a lot of writing, is that it is written in a very like specific voice of the author and where they're from. But yeah, it's definitely something you get used to as an editor. Is different styles of language in different countries.
Yeah, especially the Australians, they have like barbecue is Barbie, and I think Sheila is their bathroom or something. And you guys use loo, we use restroom, so there's a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Yeah,
it does change as a reader, and you're expecting like, oh, this is set in America, but why are they using the word loo, right?
yeah. Yeah, that's true. It gets kind of complicated because I'm a writer as well, and because I haven't been living in England for a couple of years, and I'm around a lot of American people. So, for example, I was writing something the other day, and I used the word sweater, and usually in England would say the word jumper. And I was like, why did I just use the word sweater? That's not natural to me, but it is by now. It just is. So my language is very kind of mixed up and confused when I write between American and British. It's really interesting. It says something about, like the life of the author, I guess, as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah. So when you edit for an author, do you really have to check their background, like which audience are they trying to serve? Right? Right. Or
Yeah. Yeah, so I work with a British author who writes a series of like a thriller series, and she is British, but she uses American English in her writing. So I have to be aware that her audience is mostly American and make sure that none of her British isms fall through in her writing, which does often happen, using an S instead of a Z, or a really British terminology that I'm like, okay, but Americans wouldn't necessarily understand what that means.
yeah, yeah. That must be hard as well. So have you does the gender of the author also um does it make a difference in terms of editing? Do you also need to like change your approach when, like, example, you're a woman, but then you're working for America, not an American, but male, and using a male perspective. So that would also affect, like, do you have to switch as well to their gender and then their perspective as well as an author, right?
That's a really interesting question, actually. I mean, my two writers who I've worked the longest with, one is a man and one is a woman. And I've never really felt a difference, between my editing style for both of them. But I guess there are some scenes sometimes written from like a male perspective that I do try and just make sure that it's portraying women in like not an offensive way. But he never writes about women offensively anyway, But I think as a woman, that would always be in the back of my mind, editing a book, is that I probably would bring that up content-wise if someone was writing a woman in like a very bad way. So it hasn't come up yet. as an editor. Maybe it will, I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. And also working with different genres as well. Like, how can you convince, like, I'm a romantic comedy author. So how can you convince, like, oh, you've been working with thrillers or writers that work with thrillers, but how can you convince, like, a particular writer that's writing in a particular genre that, hey, I can edit your book for you. But like the author will like ask, do you have any experience in writing or editing for someone who's into romantic comedy? Because as a author, especially if you're new, you're like, will it make a difference? Will I, if I go with someone that specializes in editing romantic comedies or something? No.
And yeah, that is quite a big thing that writers look for in an editor as well, is someone who has experience in their genre. I think I would definitely be able to convince a writer that I could edit in a lot of different genres, just because I have a lot of experience in literature as a student and in reading, and I write in many different genres as well. So I feel like I have a good knowledge of many genres, but that's also why I have a kind of pool of editors that I quality checked and that I rely upon. So that if a genre does come my way, I can say, okay, that's a perfect book, for her or for him to edit. So that also helps as well to really set up the right editor with the right writer. Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned a pool of editors. So how many like editors are you working with, like fellow editors?
Yeah, it's on a freelance basis. So I kind of have I have like 4 solid editors who I know I can depend upon. If a book comes my way and I think, that would be perfect for her, then that's what I do. For example, I just set up with a Spanish editor because I can't speak Spanish myself. Or edit it, obviously. So I got in touch with a Spanish editor, and quality checked her experience and her work as an editor. And now it's great because I have a Spanish editor on the team who I really like and trust. So now I can accept books in Spanish, and that's fun as well. It like diversifies our experiences as editors in an editing company. So that's good.
Mm-hmm. And so what is the turnaround time for you guys? You said you have a package, like it includes proofreading, it includes developmental editing, and it includes line editing. And thank you anyway for explaining that, because I was always like confused, like, oh yeah, which one is which?
Yeah.
But your turnaround, like say an author is like, I have to publish by this date. Do you work with the author? Is always like, please give us at least 2 weeks or 3 weeks turnaround time or something?
I'm a big fan of adapting to people's deadlines. So if someone does have a tight deadline, I will like really go out of my way to meet that deadline. Most people don't have such a strict deadline. They've given themselves enough time, which is obviously a better idea when you're a writer. I mean, it's difficult to say. It depends a lot on how much editing it needs, what kind of editing, copy, line editing, that will take a lot longer than proofreading.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't often give more than 2 weeks to edit an average length book. Yeah. Because I usually focus, on one book at a time. So that's just my sole focus, 2 weeks, completely focused on editing that one book. So it doesn't often take me more than 2 weeks, to be honest. Yeah.
And what is like, what you call that? Let's say you're done with your your editing and stuff like that. Do you also work in a with a author's like series? Like, oh, I'm gonna work on your 2, 3, 4 book, 5 book series or something. Do you also do that as well?
Yeah, that's actually mainly what I do. So the author I've been working longest with is a guy that I've been working with for 3 years now.
Ah,
And I think I've edited about 18 or 20 of his books,
wow.
like me personally. So that's really interesting to work with someone for such a long time and see how their writing changes. And he's kind of gone between 2 or 3 different genres. Um, and that's the thing about, my speciality as a editor is definitely action thriller genre. And that's the thing about that genre, is it does go hand in hand with, writing series as well. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you mentioned a while ago, like an average book. Like, what is a typical average book? Is it like 50,000 words, or um, and
I wrote a blog post about this the other day,
oh,
which was really interesting for me to research, because
um,
I work per word count, so I don't necessarily completely track every hour I spend on a book, So
oh,
I wasn't entirely sure what an average length spent on a book is. But for a normal novel, you're looking at about 60 to 80,000 words,
mm-hmm.
and it takes roughly 53 hours to copy edit an 80,000 word book.
Wow.
So, if you're talking standard 40-hour week, that's a week and a half kind of thing. Um, yeah, for copy editing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Just the copy editing, and it doesn't include the other editing.
exactly. I mean, I think that's what's good about paying to get multiple edits done at once, because obviously when I'm copy editing a book, I can also be looking at the story at the same time and doing the developmental editing at the same time. Um,
Mm.
Whereas if I copy edit a book, that takes 2 weeks. And then if they come back to me and say, oh, I also want it developmentally edited, I'm going to have to read it again and
Oh,
develop it. Yeah. But yeah, that's the kind of time scale that we're looking at.
yeah. Can you tell us more about, and just, I'll also include the blog. You can email me later. I'll include the blog in the show notes.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and can you tell me how we can find you? Like, what is your website? And I'll include it in the show notes as well. And yeah, how can we find you?
Yeah, so the website is called Savage. Well, the company is called Savage Edits because my last name is Savage and I edit savagely. So it's www.savageedits.com. We just started a blog, so we have a great blog, everything for indie authors. Anything you need, you can find there. And we're also on all social media, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And it's at Ceri Savage Edits, which is my name.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I'm really happy with our social media. It's looking really great, especially our Instagram page. So if you want to learn more about the indie author world and the indie author community, you need to be on the social media, because it's just massive communities online, all sharing advice and stories about how to self-publish. So that's where you can find us. Yeah.
I know, that's why I'm sorry about my dog. He just loves
Oh, it's okay. He's adorable, so it's
it.
fine.
He's always like, I have to be in the show somehow. He'll always disrupt. I'm like, yeah, I can't help it. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna share all of the information on my YouTube and my social media and my blog. No, no, my podcast and my blog. Yeah,
Cool.
and yeah, usually I share on all the most of the Facebook groups that I can like share it to and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. That would be ace.
Yeah, I really do appreciate like talking to you, because like I have read about copy editing and stuff like that, but it's still very confusing until someone really explains it to you in a
Yeah.
way that you can understand. Because
Mhm.
on when you explain it, like you write it and explain it, it's like what it's like, huh? How can that help me as a writer and stuff like that?
think in general that's a big problem with the self-publishing world is everything can just seem so overwhelming at first, and it's actually very simple. You just have to go through it step by step. But there's also, people use different terminology for different things. Stuff like, developmental editing is also called content editing, and that just adds to the confusion. So yeah, I'm glad if I can outline it in a simple way. Yeah.
Yeah, because I also didn't know that line editing and copy editing are actually basically the same. I thought there was like, oh, so line editing is different from copy editing now. So
Yeah, I mean, there are very tiny differences. But basically what we do is line editing and copy editing in the same thing. They're tiny differences. And I think being very meticulous about those small differences is actually more confusing than it's worth. It's not that complicated. Yeah.
yeah, since you guys read the entire book, do you guys also help with writing blurbs or no? It's like, because that is sort of like, in a way, not really editing, but it's like, because you have seen the entire book, you have some idea, hey, maybe this should be your blurb. Do you help with that as well? It's just mainly editing, or do you
No,
help?
yeah, I have helped with that. With one of my clients, I wrote the synopsis,
Yeah.
synopses, um, to go on their website. So it wasn't really the blurb, but it was like they wanted a fresh perspective of their story, because once again they were just too close to the story and they had difficulty summarizing it in about 250 words, which I was more able to do. So I did that for one of my clients. For the other, I also wrote blog posts, for a couple of blog posts for his website. And also I was able to do that because, like you said, I know the story, and honestly I think I know it as well as they do, from reading it and rereading it. So I definitely really enjoy being part of the after editing process as well. Yeah.
That's good. That's really good. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that you took the time, and I'm sorry for our technical difficulty
Oh, no, it's fine.
before. And then during with bacon disrupting, you might have to edit that one out because it didn't sound good. But
I always love a dog disturbing a video chat. It's fine.
I know he's always in most of my YouTube like stuff because he has to be the star, as you can. Yeah. And my podcast usually comes out on a Wednesday, so I think yours will be. Yeah, I'll message you when it's gonna come out, and I'll also send you the link of the previous author that I interviewed for this week as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely be listening.
Huh? Yeah.
Listening, yeah, it's a really cool thing to be doing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's watching now. It's like, okay. Okay, thank you very much, and enjoy your night and stuff. It's an early night. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Well, I really appreciate you talking to me. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll share this, and hopefully you get a lot of clients from this. You have
That would be
like exposure and helping others.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, clients are always nice, but I genuinely do just want to like connect with indie authors and stuff as well, and share. So
Okay,
how that happens.
thank you very much, and I'll check out your blog post as well.
Yeah, go for it. Sweet. Let's connect. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, and have a nice evening, and stay safe.
Yeah. You too. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.